Good morning. I'm Arthur Gregg, and welcome to the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Breakfast. Before we get started with the actual program, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the original inhabitants of the land that we call UT Dallas. UT Dallas stands on land originally settled and occupied by the Caddo, Wichita, and Comanche people. We recognize the history of UT Dallas begins with the forced removal of the indigenous people through the legacy of colonization. And now, stay tuned for a special welcome from our president, Dr. Richard Benson.
Good morning. It is my honor to be a part of the celebration of one of our nation's most revered leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His legacy is one of action and service to others. Today also is an opportunity to be inspired by Dr. King. The theme this year is moving from injustice to justice. The events of the past year have spotlighted the work yet to be done to accomplish Dr. King's vision for a society where people of all races and backgrounds could live as equals in harmony and safety. Dr. King knew that issues of local importance were the springboards for change on a larger scale. This is especially true in the tragic deaths of Black Americans, which have drawn attention to the nation's struggle with systemic racism. And we can't overlook the problems that have been exposed during the pandemic, including food, housing, economic insecurity, as well as health disparities. Dr. King and other courageous civil rights leaders made many strides for progress in the 1960s. However, it is apparent that this important work is not anywhere near being complete. That is why UT Dallas is taking a firm stand in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our work is not done. There has been a learning curve for us at the institution, but I am confident that we are finding our way. Let me tell you about our progress. At the administrative level, we are embarking on a search for a new vice president to head an expanded Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I want to thank Dr. George Fair for the excellent job he did in leading this unit and ensuring that we can move forward in continuing our work. We are looking at our curriculum offerings for programming that is diverse and inclusive. My colleagues in the faculty and staff are stepping forward to help make this happen. We are developing training for staff and faculty that will promote our ideals in the workplace. Our commitment to becoming more inclusive will be reflected in our strategic plan that is currently being updated and will include new initiatives and goals to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion. These goals, which will be announced soon, will be published and regularly updated so that everyone can track our progress. We can and will do much more to honor our commitment. Finally, let me ask you to join me in upholding this commitment. Our progress depends on meeting these very important goals. You can help move this university, our community, and our nation to be better, to be stronger. You are the ones who will think differently, act with purpose, and produce results that benefit us all. And just as Dr. King did, I encourage you to lean into the challenges, knowing that there is a possibility of great hope and great change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benson. Well, again, welcome to our virtual annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Breakfast. Unfortunately, this year, we can't be together. You know how we greet one another as we wait to rush the doors to find that perfect seat at the table that we think will be the first one chosen to go out for the breakfast? So I'm going to miss that. But I do have my top 5 things that I'm not missing this year at our annual celebration breakfast. Let's go. Number 5, my 25-minute commute to the campus. My commute today was about 2 whole minutes. Number 4, having to park, walk to our office, and then back to the DGAC in freezing weather. Number 3, making sure that there are enough coffee stations. You know how we are about our coffee. Number 2, reminding you all that there's plenty of food and remember that others have to eat. And number 1, not only do I get to choose exactly what and how much I eat, but I can watch this program as many times as I want because it's going to be recorded and played on all our social media platforms. So now, enjoy a motivational video by everyone's favorite kid president. And no, this is not me as a kid. Thank you.
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin Luther King Jr. It's funny to think about because now we know his name so well, but at one time he was just a kid. Like maybe you're a kid watching this. Well, he was a kid too. Well, maybe you're a grown-up. That's okay too. Former kids are welcome here. I don't discriminate. Martin Luther King grew up to be a great man, of course, but things weren't all that great in the world while he was growing up. Not everybody was treated like they were somebody. And I believe that you should treat everybody like it's their birthday. But they didn't do that. People looked at the color of their skin. And that's how they decided if they were friends or not. Not cool, man. That didn't make him feel good. That didn't make anybody feel good. But his parents helped him grow up. He went to church. He learned about love. He grew up to be a minister to help a lot of people. He did all sorts of cool stuff. He helped a lot of people learn about love too. But still, he looked around and said, things should be better. He wanted to change things, so he did stuff. He decided, instead of spreading the hate, he would spread the love. He wanted to bring people together. Where people were hurting, he stepped in to help. He marched with them, he walked with them. He walked arm in arm with everyone. Sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Some people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that, it just keeps going, even when things are dark. And, well, I don't like this part of the story, but things did get pretty dark. Someone who didn't agree with him shot him. He died in April 1968. Now, kid President, why are you telling us this sad story? Come on. I know, I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't like that happened. Now, I gotta tell you something. When things aren't awesome, it can be tough. And things won't always be awesome, but your response can be. Martin Luther King's response? It was awesome. Today I just wanted us to think about this. Isn't it cool that we can change things? Like any of us, anybody. He dreamed and he changed things. And he dreamed and he kept sharing his dreams. They became not just his dream, a lot of people's dream. Like this one. I have a dream that little black boys and black girls will join hands with white boys and white girls and become sisters and brothers. That's a pretty good dream. Let's dream like that. That could change things.
Thank you, Kid President. Wasn't that motivating? I just love that kid. Now, let's hear from Adrian Watson, the coordinator of cultural programs and events in the Multicultural Center, who will introduce our speaker for the morning. Adrian is muted.
Technology. This whole time I was talking, it wasn't muted. Okay, back again. Start over. Francois Booker-Drew, PhD, is a network weaver who believes relationships are the key to our personal, professional, and organizational growth. She has been quoted, featured in Forbes, Ozzy, Bustle, Huffington Post, Modern Luxury, and other media outlets due to an extensive background in leadership, nonprofit management, philanthropy, partnership development, training, and education. She is currently Vice President of Community Affairs for the state of Texas, responsible for grant making, educational programming, and community initiatives. Formerly the National Community Engagement Director for World Vision, she served as a catalyst, partnership broker, and builder of the capacity of local partners in multiple locations across the U.S. to improve and sustain the well-being of children and their families. She is also co-founder of Heritage Giving Circle, one of the first Black women giving circles in the state of Texas, founder of Power in Action Dallas, and the owner of Solstice consultancy providing training and consultations for nonprofits and small businesses. She is the recipient of numerous honors that recently include 2020 Each Moment Matters awardee, 2020 Dallas Leadership Foundation's Leadership Award, WFAA's While I Have Your Attention, 2020 TED by SMU Speaker, and 2019 Dallas Business Journal's Women in Business honoree. Francois graduated with a PhD from Antioch University in Leadership and Change with a focus on social capital, diverse women, change management, and relational leadership. She attended the Jean Baker Miller Institute at Wellesley for training in relational cultural theory and has completed facilitator training on immunity to change based on the work of Keegan and Leahy of Harvard. She has also completed training through UNICEF on equity-based evaluations. Dr. Booker Drew is currently an adjunct professor at Tulane University in the Masters of Public Administration program, teaching governance, leadership, and sustainability, and an affiliate faculty member at the Graduate School of Leadership and Change, Antioch University. She is the host of the podcast, The Tapestry, and author of 3 workbooks for women, Fly Away, Ready for a Revolution, 30 Days to Jolt Your Life, and Rules of Engagement, Making Connections Last. Francois serves on multiple boards, including Buckner International, for Oak Cliff, EdCore, Mayor's Star Council, and Soul Rep Theater Company. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Francois Booker Drew.
Good morning. Adrienne, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Don't feel bad because I have done that where I've had full conversations and thought I was not muted, so it happens. But thank you for the warm introduction. And I want to thank Arthur and Bruce and the entire UT Dallas family for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. So I'm going to pull up my screen so we can start this conversation. I really wanted to focus this morning on not only the theme of moving from injustice to justice, but the secondary piece to that for me is making sure that we don't forget. It's so easy for us to have celebrations where we're excited to honor someone's legacy, but sometimes we can forget very important things about their legacy. And if we're not careful, we're destined to repeat things because we don't pay attention to the totality of who they are. And so she's already told you about who I am. I want to talk a little bit about my work because one of the things that Bruce asked was, how does Dr. King even show up in the work that I do? And so I'm really fortunate in my work at the State Fair of Texas. I started in 2016 and there was not a Department of Community Affairs. And it was at a time when a lot was going on around the fair and the community. And it was really with all of those, background variables happening. It was really a time to think about possibility and what could be done. And for me, it was important to listen to our community versus thinking that I had all the answers and that I could solve for everything. It was really recognizing the capacity that already existed and the amazing people and organizations that are in South Dallas. And so after going around and listening, and let me say this, I'd worked at St. Philip's, the African American Museum, South Dallas Cultural Center, Miss Craft's home. I had a lot of experience. My church is there. What I did not want to do was take for granted that I knew what people needed. And that's so important when we're working in communities and trying to create change, is that we don't make the assumption that because we've read a book or we've had some experience or that even we're a part of a group that we understand what people's needs are, because no community is monolithic. And South Dallas definitely is not. And so based on what I heard in the community, there were 3 things that just kept coming up. It was, how do we build the capacity for our nonprofits? How do we make sure that the State Fair is economic engine can really begin to start, thinking about ways that we build the capacity of businesses in our area. And then education, how do we support our local schools in helping them with the work that they're doing? And so I wanted to make sure that we were paying attention to the area immediately around us. Even though I know our name is the State Fair of Texas, we are in South Dallas. That is our home. And so I wanted to make sure that we were even better neighbors. And so we really look at the zip codes around our area. And we have done some Southern Dallas, Southern sector initiatives. And for me, it was, how do we use our social capital, those relationships? How do we use our expertise in education? And how do we use our own financial resources to leverage and, serve as a catalyst for the great work that was already happening in South Dallas? And the way that that's done is through the grants that we do, through our programs that we provide, and how we support our community. And I'm very clear about where our work lands. It's not really at an individual level, although we work with individuals. It's how can we create impact at an organizational and a systems level. What I am so proud of is the fact that we are able to be a part of changing the narrative of philanthropy. When we think about how grant money is given, not just in Dallas or the state of Texas, but around the country, 0.6% of all funding in this country is given to organizations led by Black women. And so the idea that Black folks that are leading nonprofits typically are not getting the grants to the degree that larger nonprofits, especially our small to mid-sized nonprofits, but are not getting those grants. I'm so proud that we're able to give money to 90% of the organizations that we fund are led by people of color. And so making sure that we're being intentional about the way in which we're giving our funds. We also created a category for equity and social and racial justice. Even though we were funding in those spaces, we wanted to call it out because we thought it was so important to let folks know that we were behind those initiatives in our community. And so this just gives you kind of an overview of the work that I get to do every single day. And I'm so proud to be able to have a small role in contributing. And so for me, that is my way of honoring the legacy of Dr. King, is really looking at how do we not only use the resources that we have to build a community, but working in partnership with the folks that are on the ground that are doing the work. And so I want to start to kind of talk about with you the life of Dr. King and some lessons that we can learn moving forward. And so I love this quote: is to ignore evils to become an accomplice to it. We daily make decisions on whether or not we are going to do something. And even in our willingness not to make a decision, we have made one. And so we have to decide and be intentional every single day how our decisions are impacting our communities and the legacy that we want to create, like Dr. King did. And so I always want to be honest and upfront. And I think sometimes what has happened in our society is that we have sugarcoated the legacy of Dr. King. We've painted this picture that everybody liked him, and Kid President was on point when he said that a lot of people didn't like him. And that is so important, because now it seems like everybody, wants to celebrate him. But there was a time when King was not a very liked person in this country. It says in 1966, twice as many Americans had an unfavorable opinion of Dr. King. Life magazine, when he talked about the anti-Vietnam War and he gave his speech, they talked about him and basically condemned what he was saying. Dallas Morning News even called King the headline hunting high priest of nonviolent violence, whose roadshow in Memphis was like a torchbearer sprinting into a powder house. And then even after his death, a congressman blamed him for his own murder. And so he said that he who sows the seed of sin shall reap and harvest a whirlwind of evil. So I want to paint the picture that King was not who we see today, that everyone wants to love and celebrate. There were a lot of people who did not like Dr. King, and despite their dislike of him, he did not allow that to stop him from making the change that was necessary in doing what he thought was important. And then it's important for you to also understand the context in which King was in. So not only did they not like what King was representing, but when you look at some of the data from this time period, a month before the March on Washington, 54% of white Americans thought the King administration was pushing racial integration too fast. A few months later, 59% of Northern white Americans and 78% of Southern white Americans disapproved of Black folks trying to get their civil rights. And that same year, 78% of white Southern parents and 33% of white Northern parents objected to sending their kids to a school where half of the students were Black. And it wasn't until 1995 with Gallup's study that they found out that a majority of white citizens then approved marriage between Black and white people until 1995. So again, what I want to do is lay the foundation that this wasn't a time where everybody was happy, and even post his death, it still wasn't a time where people were, excited about what he was trying to bring in, the change that he was initiating. It's also important to understand that as much as there were white folks who didn't like what King was about and what he was trying to do, there were also Black folks who did not like what King was doing. Zola Curry, many people are not aware of this, attempted to assassinate Dr. King. She stabbed him with a letter opener at a Harlem book signing. And so although she had some mental issues that were going on based on old reports that I've read, there still should demonstrate that King had opposition coming from a number of directions. This quote that he stated, he says, at a meeting in Chicago in 1965, he was shaken after he was booed by young Black men in a crowd. And this quote, he says, after I went home that night with an ugly feeling, selflessly, I thought of my sufferings and sacrifices over the last 12 years, he recalled. Why should they boo one so close to them? But as I lay awake thinking, I finally came to myself, and I could not for the life of me have less than patience and understanding for those young men. So even though he had opposition of folks who did not look like him, there were people who were in his own community who did not like what King represented. It's also critical to understand the changes that have happened and how much further that we have to go even after King's existence. That when you look at wealth, generational wealth in this country, what was happening in the 60s, if you look at this chart, there was still, it was dismal in terms of the ability for Black families to leave their children wealth. Today, we still see that same issue, even though there have been some changes, there's still some work to be done. When we think about poverty of the era that King was in, and we look at the numbers and see what it was compared to what it is today, it's changed, but there's still work to be done. When we look at the unemployment rate and we see that of Black folks and white Americans and how different it is, and yet there are these changes that we've experienced, that says there's still some work that needs to be done. So one of the things that I think is important, that as we look at King, that we pay attention to the lessons that his life teaches us. You notice that he had opposition. When you're a trailblazer, you are going to face opposition. People who may not look like you, people who look like you may not necessarily agree with what you are trying to do. But if it is going to be for the betterment of folks, you cannot allow that opposition to stop you from doing the work. There will never be an opportune time to make things happen. When you look at the data that I just showed you, where you see all this enormous poverty, the lack of generational wealth, wasn't an opportune time for King to begin to start the movement to create change. Even now, there's still challenges that exist. There's never going to be a good time. That can't be an excuse for us not to move forward and do the things that we know are going to make the differences that we need and deserve in our communities. The other thing is, whatever decision you choose to make, it will impact your legacy and the lives of others. King made a very intentional decision to do something that was going to have an impact for generations to come. Just the decisions that he made in his writings and his speaking, we're still talking about it decades later, and it still is having impact. What decisions are you making every single day that are building the foundation for not only your future, but the future of others around you? And then it's important to learn from the past. So looking at that data, list of those quotes, listening to those quotes, and seeing the gains that have happened. Yeah, there have been some changes. There have been some things that have been good that have happened. But don't get it twisted. There still is a lot of work to be done, and we still have so much to accomplish. So I want to take this time to really think about Dr. King and what he has been teaching us over all this time, that through his words, there's some powerful lessons that we can begin to embody in our work. So there are three things that I want to focus on that Dr. King really paid attention to. Dr. King focused on poverty. Dr. King focused on people. Dr. King focused on purpose. And I think that all three of those are things that we can really plant our flag in and begin to say in the ground and say, these are the things that are still important for us to focus on, is not just looking at ourselves, but beginning with us and then thinking about what do we do to then change our communities. And so King said some amazing things. It was so hard to go through all of his quotes and really begin to start thinking about what are the most relevant ones for our conversation today. And instead of reading all of this, I really want to just highlight pieces of his quotes. He says, we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. So even though he made this comment in 1967, there is so much truth in that to what we see even in our own world today. And so how do we make sure that in our lifetime that we are being intentional about and not allowing our cities, our state, our country, our world to go through this spiritual death? Because if we don't pay attention to people and we have people that are in need, if we look at the South Dallases and Bachman Lakes and West Dallases in our community, how do we have so much resource and yet we still see people that are in serious need? What COVID has done has really highlighted and amplified what happens when people don't have employment that's steady, when they're gig economy workers, what happens when people don't have health insurance, what happens when there are racial disparities in the health system. What we are seeing now is the opening that many of us already knew existed, but now we're really beginning to see those things and how there have been so many inequities. How do we make sure that we turn this around where we aren't dying and seeing people die so much, the physical death, but also seeing a country lose the soul, its soul? And then he talks about in his report to his staff, another quote, he says that we have moved from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights, and that we must move into this new era, this era of revolution. We must recognize that we can't solve our problem until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. As we have these conversations about diversity and equity and inclusion, it's important that we talk about issues of power and privilege. We must talk about that power is real, and we must talk about the distribution of that isn't always fair, that people are not at the table who need to be in rooms to have conversations that directly impact them, that we need to make sure that we're investing in our communities, and the things that King was saying in the 60s ring true today. He talked about that there are 40 million people, and one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system and about a broader distribution of wealth, that we need to begin to think about the people that build this country and that are a part of our world and society. And how do we begin to start making sure that people have access and availability to opportunities, and that we are really having these conversations about inequities and power distribution. And then the other piece that King focused on was people. And he says that I cannot reach fulfillment without thou. The self cannot be self without other selves. Self-concern without other concern is like a tributary that has no outward flow to the ocean. Stagnant, still, and stale, it lacks both life and freshness. Nothing would be more disastrous and out of harmony with our self-interest than for the developed nations to travel to a dead-end road of inordinate selfishness. So we have to begin to start thinking about the gifts and the talents and treasures that exist in all of us. And that if I'm not able to fulfill who I am destined to be, then it impacts you as well, because you don't get to benefit from the greatness that lies in me. And if you're not reaching your full potential, then I don't get to benefit from that as well. And so we have to see people beyond just profit and begin to see people that are built with passion and purpose. And how do we help them tap into that potential to reach their full possibility? And then King says, I choose to give my life for those who have been left out. This is the way I'm going. If it means suffering a little bit, I'm going that way. If it means dying for them, I'm going that way. That he was committed to identify not with his own privilege, even though as a Black man, King was educated, he was a minister, he had access to places, and we all have to be aware of the multiple identities that we have. But King made a conscious decision that he wanted to identify with those people who were not at the table and to begin to walk with them and be a vessel to create the change that was needed on their behalf. And he even talked about that what America had given to Black people was a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that Bank of Justice is bankrupt. So even in the midst of opposition, he still had hope. And I think that's a lesson for us, that even with all the disparities and inequities that we see, that we still have to hope for the best in one another and even in our country. And then the last piece is King focused on purpose. So he focused again on people, he focused on poverty, but he focused on purpose. And he says, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure reality. So if South Dallas isn't thriving, North Dallas is missing out on opportunities to benefit and be able to watch the greatness that exists in that community. And so we are missing out on real opportunities to tap into the best and the brightest in our communities if we're not invested in the people and wanting them to be all that God has called and created them to be. If a man is called a street sweeper, he should sweep streets, even as Michelangelo painted. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. So even in this, King is looking at position, that despite position and roles that sometimes we dismiss and discard, that there is greatness that lies in each of us. And we have to see that in ourselves, and we have to see that in each other. King said, if a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live. What is it in you that calls you, that beckons you, that says that this is something that you need to be a part of? When you figure out what your purpose looks like, then what you will be able to do to eliminate disparity, but to illuminate the possibilities for yourself and others will be huge. So what is it that you are willing to die for? And so there are lessons, because I love giving lessons, even my books about lessons. So what King teaches us is it starts with us, that we got to focus on people. We got to focus on those issues in our communities that are keeping people from experience and fullness. We got to focus on purpose and helping others find their own purpose and reach their possibility. So what can we do moving forward from injustice to justice, from a campus standpoint, it's so important that we understand Black folks cannot be responsible for the emotional labor, and that Black faculty and Black staff can't be responsible for teaching others about the importance of inclusion. This has got to be a collaboration. It can't just be one group that is responsible for doing this. It has to be everybody making an investment into doing this kind of work. It's important to do the work. It is not enough just to say that we are about diversity and equity and inclusion. It's about being anti-racist. So what does that mean? That means that we have to learn, we have to read, we have to do the work. And there are folks that I list here, Peggy McIntosh, for some of you, that's going way back. That's the old school of this movement. But reading her work, Ta-Nehisi Coates, there's so many folks that have done some great work. How could you all start reading and discussion groups on campus that you educate yourself about these ideas that we've been programmed with, that sometimes we don't even recognize that we have, but we've got to do the work and go much further than just making these statements to becoming anti-racist. Private confession is good. It's wonderful to be able to talk to your friends and share, how you feel about this, but faith without works is dead. So how can you collaborate and advocate for change as a university on a city level, regionally, statewide, nationally? What does it look like for you to begin to start paying attention to those barriers and systems that create obstacles for people in our communities? And then put your money where your mouth is. Start donating to causes like Faith in Texas and others that are working in social justice spaces that are being led by people of color, and begin to demand that the organizations that you fund do the exact same thing. Then start questioning the organizations and workplaces that you're in. If there are few people of color or none who are employed or involved, you got to start demanding change. You also have to begin to look at your culture, because beginning to bring people into these spaces that still have toxic environments is window dressing. It's not going to change anything. So if there is not a change of beliefs, a change in our identity and how we operate, it looks good on the outside, but on the inside, it's still messed up and it's foul. This goes for looking at senior leadership. This looks at your board of directors, whether it's at a university level or within your organizations, the companies that you work for. That is important to pay attention to that. And then question investment. Those groups that you're supporting, where are they investing their dollars? If they are funding causes that hurt communities of color, then you need to pay attention to that. If there are banks that you're putting your money in that are supporting mass incarceration, or people that are backing policies that are detrimental to our communities, then those folks need to be dismissed from your roster of support. And then we need more than allies. An ally is like, yay, I cheer you on. This is great. Y'all go do what you do. But what we need are co-conspirators. We need people that are willing to get involved beyond just the affirmations and statements of support. And so my final thoughts on King, and this quote is powerful because it resonates in 2021. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems, King said. I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. So how are you involved in your local, state, and national decision making? And what information are you using to inform your decisions? Because what we know is people are getting a lot of information that's not necessarily true. And yet those decisions are impacting their purpose, they're impacting people, they're impacting possibilities. So what information are you using to inform your decisions that ultimately impact your legacy and mine? And we must change. Somebody must say to America, America, if you have contempt for your life, if you exploit human beings by seeing them as less than human, if you will treat human beings as a means to an end, you thingify those human beings. And if you will thingify persons, you will exploit them economically. And if you will exploit persons economically, you will abuse your military power to protect your economic investments and your economic exploitations. So what America must be told today is that she must be born again. The whole structure of American life must be changed. What COVID has taught us is that we have got to change, that the things that we have been doing around our economic system, around healthcare, the way that we have treated people, 2020 has been clear vision. When you think about 2020 and you go to an eye doctor, that is perfect vision. What we have gotten this year is some real clarity. What will you do with that clarity that you've been given to begin to create the change that is possible for all of us? It is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for all people. So do the work. Make sure that you are thinking about your own purpose, seeing that in others, understanding that poverty still exists in our communities, and people are so important. And if you don't fulfill your potential, then I don't completely fulfill mine, because our lives are interconnected. And when you do well, so do I. Thank you very much. This is how you can reach out to me, and feel free to connect with me. And I hope that you're able to take something away today that will begin to create the legacy that will change lives for generations to come. Thank you.
Wow. Dr. Booker Drew, you've taken us to church. You've given us a mirror. You taught us a lesson. You showed us a way. I've taken notes. This has been amazing. Thank you for the work that you are doing and for the words that you're putting out there. You know, we've learned a lot lately that words do mean a lot. Words are huge, and the words that you gave us about Dr. King and the words that you've shared today about how we can move from injustice to justice has reinvigorated, remotivated me. And so I just thank you. The UTD thanks you. And as I said to you earlier today, and jokingly, I said, hey, if you're really good today, then when we're back on campus, we'll bring you onto campus. That's a no-brainer. You are, and you have an open invitation first. And second of all, we would love to have you back on and have you on campus when we can all be together in the same room. Because if the energy that you've given us this morning is this way virtually, I can't imagine what it would be like to be all in the same space together. So amazing work. Thank you for reminding us about Dr. King and the fact that, you know, he wasn't loved by everybody. And sometimes we won't be loved by everybody, but if we're about change, if we're about making our words and our walk and our talk match up, we've got to be okay with that and continue to move forward. So we look forward to continuing to work with you. And for our UTD family, we see the words that you are chatting and bringing to Dr. Booker Drew. And so we just say, we have the opportunity to really be the change. We are a beacon and we are being watched. And so what are we going to do as a community? What are we going to do at UTD to move from injustice to justice? So that is a call, that is a rally call, that is a challenge, all of the above. And so again, thank you so much, Dr. Booker Drew. And I look forward to continue to work with you and building a relationship between you and the University of Texas at Dallas.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored for this opportunity.
You're just the best. So anyway, we could go on and on and on. So at this time, I would like to bring on Dr. George Fair, who I want to thank so much as a leader, for being a leader and a true beacon on the campus at University of Texas at Dallas. And one of the things that he always tells us is that I've been on this campus longer than some of you have been living. And so we appreciate the doors that you've opened, the paths that you've created, the ways to get us to where we are today. And so now for closing remarks from Dr. Fair. And before you go, Be sure to hang out with us right after his closing remarks, because we have an evaluation that we definitely need to have you to fill out, and it'll be on the screen, and you can click on, you know how we do. And then we have a special premiere video of what's going to be coming up in the Multicultural Center. And guess what? You do not want to miss that. I'll say that again. You do not want to miss that. So, without any further ado, Dr. George Fair, Vice President for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Booker Drew, for joining us today as our guest speaker. Thank you to everyone watching for being part of the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Breakfast to honor Dr. King's legacy. And I'd like to give a special thanks to our co-sponsors, the Student Union Activities and Advisory Board, and the Office of Diversity and Community Engagement. As you know, the theme of this year's event is moving from injustice to justice. The events over the past year have led many to reflect on how much progress has been made toward realizing Dr. King's vision for equality. We know that there is much more work to be done. Each of us in the UT Dallas community can play a role in moving toward justice. The University of Texas at Dallas is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Events like today's celebration are part of our work to make the university an inclusive and welcoming campus for all. The Office of Diversity and Community Engagement promotes and advances diversity through programs for students, faculty, staff, and the broader community. The Multicultural Center, for example, provides cultural heritage celebrations, lectures, educational presentations, diversity dialogues, and much more. Community engagement provides programs such as the Future Comments that help prepare younger students from underserved communities for college. The Diversity Scholarship Program has provided critical support to more than 236 students with significant financial need. The Gallerstein Gender Center offers counseling, mentoring, lectures, and events including Lavender graduation and Safe Zone Ally training to create a network of allies who help shape a campus culture that values and celebrates the LGBT+ community. Institutional diversity initiatives developed employee resource groups that are bringing faculty and staff together. We hope that you will join us in our efforts to get involved as a participant, volunteer, or donor. To our students who are with us today, I encourage you to use your education to make the world a better place. You are future leaders who will use your abilities to teach, engage, transform, design, and improve our community. As we bring today's celebration breakfast to a close, I want to thank everyone who registered for tomorrow's MLK Day of Service to support the Comic Cupboard. I'm proud of our community for uniting virtually and in person to work together to make a difference. Thank you very much.
Well, that's going to be it. So we definitely appreciate your feedback. And I'm just going to put a personal call out there for your support tomorrow with our day of giving, our day of service, and Dr. King in a Comic Cupboard. Give. You heard Dr. Booker Drew. If you know, canned goods, whatever you can donate. If you can't donate, like I said, if you can't walk, run, if you can't donate food, we'll take financial contributions, because again, we have comments who are dealing with and surviving through food insecurities. And what better way, if we want to be that community that we've talked about, than to help our comment family, than by supporting our comment cupboard. It's one of the best, most exciting. I used to say the Multicultural Center was one of the best places on campus. I would say comment cupboard is a close, very close first also. So thank you for those who support, work, and make the comment cupboard happen. You are truly amazing, and you are part of the individuals that Dr. King talked about in his dream. So at this time, a very special, don't forget the survey and see the QR code on the screen, a special video of what's coming up in the Multicultural Center. And that's all, folks. Have a great, wonderful rest of your day and enjoy. In the words of Whoopi, enjoy the view. I think that's what she says. Thank you.